The Young and the Restless spoilers Wednesday full episodes July 30th, 2025 The illusion of control had always been Kane's greatest weapon, a calm voice in chaos, a strategist hidden behind charm, a man who made everyone believe he had already calculated the outcome before the first move was made. But control is fragile. It's not bulletproof. It cracks under pressure, and when built on broken promises and buried corpses, it doesn't just crumble, it explodes. And it was Carter, the man Kane once considered his most loyal confidant, who lit the match. Everything Carter had done, every manipulation, every quiet threat, every whispered message, it had all been for Kane. He believed in Kane's vision, or at least convinced himself he did. He committed crimes for him, destroyed lives for him, even killed Damian Kane, not for vengeance or justice, but to give Kane a clear path back to Lily. But Kane's silence had become louder than any command. He no longer acknowledged Carter's efforts. He barely looked at him. And in the absence of gratitude, loyalty curdled into something darker. Resentment. Madness. And the terrifying realization that he had given everything, his freedom, his conscience, his soul, to a man who now treated him like an expendable piece. So Carter snapped. It wasn't loud at first. It was a quiet retreat into himself, a darkening of the eyes, a slow disconnection from the world. But when he took Lily Winters hostage, the world around him finally understood just how far gone he was. He didn't do it to hurt Lily. Not at first. He did it to draw Kane out, to make him feel something, to remind him that Carter still mattered. But Lily was not a pawn. She was the heart of this entire story, and Carter, even in his fractured state, understood the symbolism. Holding Lily meant holding Kane's future in his hands. And he was ready to crush it if that meant forcing Kane to look at him one last time. Kane, when confronted with the news, was paralyzed. Amanda tried to reason with him, tried to keep the unraveling narrative from swallowing them all. But Amanda's hands were already stained. Nikki Newman had just seen blood where Nick should have been. She had stormed out, refusing to sign the Chancellor contract and vowing to hold Amanda personally responsible if anything happened to Nick. Amanda, usually poised and persuasive, had no defense. The look on Nikki's face, disgust, fear, rage, had stripped Amanda of her final layer of invincibility. She didn't control the room anymore. She didn't control anything. The empire she had built beside Kane was collapsing in real time. And then came Chance. Chance had never stopped investigating the strange coincidences that followed Kane and Amanda. Damian's death. The missing evidence. The surveillance tapes mysteriously wiped. He had watched Kane from a distance, gathering information. But when he got the call about Lily's abduction, he didn't wait. He knew Carter, knew what men like him were capable of when their sense of purpose was broken. He found Carter hiding out in a secluded villa near the edge of Nice, where the sea kissed the rocks in violent bursts and the wind howled like ghosts. Inside, Lily was bound but alive. Carter was pacing, muttering, and sweating. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands trembling, but the gun never left his grip. Chance entered without backup. He thought he could talk Carter down. He thought loyalty could still be reasoned with. But loyalty, when betrayed, becomes something unrecognizable. Carter let Lily go, slowly, carefully, and for a moment it felt like resolution was possible. But as Lily stumbled toward Chance, he reached for Carter's weapon. It was instinct, protective, desperate. And in that instant, everything ended. The gun fired. Chance collapsed to the floor, blood pooling beneath him. Lily screamed. Carter stood frozen, then dropped the weapon. His eyes were vacant, dead even before the bullet left the chamber. He didn't run. He didn't speak. He walked out to the cliffs behind the villa and threw himself into the sea, leaving nothing but silence behind. News of Chance's death shattered Genoa City. Jill and Nina, already haunted by losses, now faced a pain too large to name. Nick, still missing, became a secondary headline. Amanda, who had once stood at the heart of power, was now isolated and openly blamed. Nikki, devastated and furious, went public with her withdrawal from the Chancellor partnership, naming Amanda and Kane as toxic influences that had endangered too many lives. The business deal that had once been the cornerstone of Kane's strategic plan was now dust. Investors fled. Friends distanced themselves. Amanda's silence became deafening. Kane, standing in the ashes of what had once been his calculated rise to power, was finally forced to look inward. He had lost Lily, not to death, but to the final severing of trust. She would never forgive him for letting Carter that close. He had lost Amanda, not to betrayal, but to her own ambition. He had lost Chance, not to war, but to silence. And he had lost his empire, not to rivals, but to arrogance. The man who once orchestrated chaos from behind velvet curtains now stood alone on the public stage, exposed, humiliated, and irreversibly broken. There would be investigations. There would be questions about Carter's connection to previous deaths, about Amanda's knowledge and Kane's complicity. But the damage had already been done. Carter was gone. Chance was dead. Amanda's legacy was in shambles. And Kane, the man who once believed he could control every outcome, now faced a future defined by guilt, suspicion, and the haunting possibility that the last person who ever truly believed in him had died trying to protect what Kane never deserved. In the weeks that followed, Lily remained quiet. She didn't speak to the press. She didn't confront Kane. She simply disappeared into the safety of family, surrounded by people who still saw her as more than a pawn in someone else's war. Nick was eventually found, alive but shaken, having escaped another layer of Amanda's unfinished maze. Nikki reasserted herself in the Newman Empire, more focused than ever on protecting her family from the poison that had seeped in through Kane and Amanda. Jill announced a formal separation from all Chancellor deals involving Kane. And Amanda, now persona non grata, walked away from the wreckage she helped create, not defeated, but changed, colder, sharper, and ready for whatever battlefield awaited her next. And so ended the plan that was never truly Kane's, the war that began with whispers and ended with gunshots. A hostage. A hero. A betrayal. A suicide. And the slow, public disintegration of every lie dressed as strategy. Genoa City would remember this chapter not as a business deal gone wrong, but as a tragedy, one that unfolded beneath designer suits and luxury villas, where power corrupted completely and love, once lost, could never be revived. Would you like to continue the story with Amanda trying to make a comeback, Lily secretly seeking justice, or Nick and Victor investigating the deeper layers of the plot? For a brief moment, Amanda believed she had it all under control again. The blood had been cleaned from the floor, the story rewritten with just enough precision to keep the illusion alive. Nikki stood before her, poised to sign the final papers that would seal a massive partnership between Chancellor and Newman Enterprises, a deal that Amanda had poured every ounce of energy into salvaging after the chaos left behind by Carter, Chance, and the failed operation in France. Her words were smooth, her demeanor flawless, her lies rehearsed down to the breath. She thought it might actually work. But Amanda forgot one thing. Nikki was a mother first, and mothers always feel the truth before it's spoken. Nikki paused, pen in hand, eyes sharp. She demanded to see Nick. Not later. Not after the signing. Now. Amanda hesitated. A half-second too long. And Nikki, already suspicious, narrowed her gaze. Sensing no way to deflect her, Amanda agreed and led her through the corridor of the Chancellor office complex to a private waiting room, one she had prepped earlier as a holding space. She opened the door, expecting Nikki to be underwhelmed, distracted, delayed. Instead, Nikki gasped. The room was empty, cold, and quiet, except for one damning detail, a smear of blood on the floor, still fresh, near the edge of a velvet chair. Amanda froze. Nikki turned toward her, voice suddenly trembling with rage rather than fear. She demanded an explanation. Amanda, ever the tactician, began to spin a desperate tale about a small cut, a misunderstanding, a security issue. But the lies no longer worked. Nikki saw through them all. Her son was missing. Blood was on the floor. And Amanda was trying to talk her out of reacting. Nikki stepped forward, lowered her voice to a near whisper, and promised Amanda this: if Nick had been hurt, if Amanda was involved in any way, she would burn Chancellor to the ground and drag Amanda into hell with her. Amanda said nothing. Nikki turned and stormed out, her fury vibrating in every step as she made her way to locate Victor and trace Nick's last known position. Amanda, now trembling, retreated into her office. Her confidence was gone. Her plan had been perfect, the contracts, the legal layers, the misdirections. But it all unraveled with a single crimson stain. She pulled out her phone and deactivated the signal jammer system that had kept the estate, and its many secrets, hidden for days. With the jammers down, cell phones across the area came back to life. Text messages poured in. Missed calls appeared. And for the first time in nearly a week, people were no longer in the dark. Somewhere in the surrounding countryside, Nick Newman's battered body lay motionless in a storage cellar once used for Kane's imported wine. Disoriented but alive, Nick stirred, his phone now flashing with missed messages and reconnected networks. He had been drugged and dumped by Carter, left behind when the chaos erupted. Amanda had claimed he left voluntarily. Now, with the signal restored, Nick made a call. The first was to Victor. The second was to Nikki. The third, silent and unfinished, was to Sally. Far from the estate, in a modest cottage tucked into a mountainside, Sally Spectra opened her phone for the first time in days. Signal restored, notifications flooding in, and with it, a wave of dread. She had come to France seeking peace, clarity, and distance. But when she saw the news, Chance dead, Lily missing and recovered, Nick vanished, her breath caught in her chest. She grabbed her bag and was on the first car down the mountain, her heart pounding with urgency. If Nick was alive, he'd need her. If he wasn't, she wasn't ready to think about that. Back at the estate, Victor Newman stood on the terrace, taking a deep breath of Mediterranean air. For days, his instincts had told him something was off. The deception, the sudden disappearances, the unusual silence, it all pointed to a conspiracy that threatened his family's name. But now, with Nick on the line, with Amanda cornered, and Carter dead, Victor saw the chessboard once more in motion. He had outlasted them all. Whatever Kane thought he could build, whatever Amanda thought she could salvage, it was over. Victor would not only protect his empire, he would expand it from the ashes of this chaos. Inside the main house, Kane sat in silence. Everything was gone. Carter's body had been pulled from the rocks. Amanda had stopped responding to his calls. Nikki had severed ties. Chancellor had become radioactive. And then Lily entered, not with fear or love or anger, but with finality. She stood in the doorway, her face bruised but resolute, and told Kane the words he feared more than anything. It was done. Whatever they had, whatever could have been rebuilt, was finished. And then came the sharpest cut, her promise to tell Damien's mother what had really happened. How Damien had died. Who had tried to cover it up. And what Kane had allowed to happen in the pursuit of regaining something that was never his to begin with. Kane said nothing. There was nothing left to say. This was supposed to be his triumphant return. His reinvention. A legacy reclaimed. Instead, he had become what he feared most, irrelevant, abandoned, and despised. Genoa City no longer whispered his name. It spat it out like venom. The public fallout would come next, investigations, audits, questions Amanda would no longer be able to suppress. His past crimes had resurfaced. His future was a pile of broken contracts and scattered enemies. And his present was an empty estate, drenched in betrayal. Outside, the wind swept through the garden that had once been prepared for a celebration. Lily was already gone. Victor had ordered a plane. Nikki was boarding one of her own. And Nick, limping but alive, was waiting for the woman who had never stopped loving him. As Sally stepped off her car and ran into his arms, the world began to move again. Not backward, never backward, but forward, in spite of all the wreckage. And Amanda? She watched from her hotel balcony, far from the estate. The Chancellor deal was dead. Her reputation was collapsing. And yet, she didn't weep. She didn't scream. She picked up her phone and made one last call, not to Kane, not to the authorities, but to someone far older, far more dangerous. A name only whispered by those who feared it. Because Amanda Sinclair, despite everything, wasn't finished. Not yet. She had been humiliated, yes. But she was still alive. And when survival is your only compass, vengeance becomes the map. And for Kane Ashby, that meant the worst had only just begun. Would you like me to expand next on Sally and Nick's reunion, Amanda's mysterious call, or Damien's mother arriving in Genoa City for answers and revenge?